My name is Elizabeth Carter, and I am 35 years old. I work as a senior manager at a large accounting firm, and for the past 7 years, I have been married to James. Our life together has been steady, though marked by the ongoing struggles of fertility treatments. This mansion, passed down to me by my grandmother, holds years of family memories. Located in a quiet Greenwich neighborhood, its white walls and deep green shutters make it a well-known home in the area. Stepping through the front door, the living room opens to the right, where framed family photographs tell our story. Each antique wooden frame, carefully chosen by Grandmother Martha, holds a memory of our past. Among them, one stands out, the photo from my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, taken just last year. My father, with distinguished salt and pepper hair, stands beside my mother, who still carries a youthful grace. Behind them, their carefully maintained rose garden blooms in full color. A retired high school teacher, my father always believed in shaping the heart through education, a philosophy that guided his 30-year career. Even in retirement, that belief remains strong. Though kind, he is firm in his expectations, especially when it comes to family. My mother, well known for her cooking, has always been deeply connected to community traditions. She has stood by Caroline and me through every challenge, until now. This time, her anger is unmistakable. Yet beneath it, I sense something deeper, disappointment, perhaps even sorrow. At the center of the photo collection, one picture carries special weight. Our last Christmas with grandmother before she passed away 2 years ago. She was the pillar of our family, the one who upheld tradition and discipline with unwavering strength. When she left this mansion in my care, she gave me one condition: cherish family. Only now do I truly understand the depth of those words. Next to it, my wedding photo from 7 years ago. In the picture, I wear a white gown. James stands beside me in a black tuxedo, both of us frozen in the moment we exchanged vows at the church altar. Back then, I never imagined we would find ourselves here, at this point in our marriage. Even through the struggles of fertility treatments, I had believed we could push through together. Another frame holds Caroline's college graduation photo, taken 4 years ago. She had stood in her cap and gown, full of hope and ambition. We had celebrated as a family, but now, looking at that picture fills me with conflicted emotions. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the large windows illuminates each photo frame, highlighting the moments that shaped our family history. This house, with its 4 bedrooms, spacious living areas, and a well-kept garden, is more than a home, it is a record of our past. Grandmother's words about family still define its foundation. The clock on the wall ticks steadily. Whatever happens next will become part of that history too. I exhale slowly, my eyes drifting toward the garden outside. Though the mornings in Greenwich are still dark, by 8 o'clock, I am already in the kitchen, preparing for the day. On the antique counter, another piece of my grandmother's legacy, sits a 20-pound turkey, its skin carefully coated in a blend of sage, thyme, and rosemary. I follow grandmother's handwritten recipe, making sure the seasoning is just right. Beside me, a bowl of bread and celery stuffing waits to be placed inside the turkey. From the oven, the pumpkin pie baked the night before fills the air with the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. James comes downstairs, already dressed for work. "You will make it to dinner at my parents' house tonight, right?" He straightens his tie, picking up his briefcase. "Yes, I might be a bit late, but I will be there." Something about him feels off, but I push the thought aside. For now, I have too many things to prepare. That afternoon, I arrive at my parents' house, where the familiar smells of Thanksgiving wrap around me like a warm embrace. Cranberry sauce, green bean casserole, sweet potatoes, everything is nearly ready. In the kitchen, my mother moves quickly, adjusting the final touches on dinner. The dining table, covered with an Irish linen tablecloth passed down from my grandmother, is already set. Delicate bone china and polished silverware gleam under the warm glow of the chandelier, a tradition upheld for 4 generations. By the fireplace, my father carefully rearranges the logs, ensuring the fire burns evenly. The soft crackling of the flames fills the room. "Have you heard from Caroline?" My mother's question is casual, spoken as she helps me with the table settings. I shake my head. No. She has been busy lately. My father's hands hesitate for just a second before he resumes. His reaction does not go unnoticed. At exactly 6 o'clock, the brass doorbell rings. Its deep chime echoes through the house. My mother glances toward the door. Who could that be? We were not expecting anyone. A feeling of unease settles over me as I wipe my hands and head toward the entrance. I reach for the handle, but something in my gut tells me this moment will change everything. My mother's words trailed off as I pulled open the heavy wooden door. There, standing before us, was Caroline. Her bright magenta dress, far too flashy for the occasion, stood out sharply against the evening light. And behind her, James. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The fireplace crackled, its flickering flames casting an eerie glow over their faces. From the kitchen, the savory aroma of turkey filled the air, but no one noticed. Something inside me turned cold, a slow, creeping numbness spreading through my chest. The living room, untouched for years, still carried grandmother's presence. Father's dark green armchair sat by the fireplace, and mother was seated on the sofa beside it, just as always. The furniture, unchanged for decades, was about to witness a moment that would tear our family apart. Relatives had gathered, some seated by the window, others standing near the fireplace, all wearing expressions of confusion at the sight of Caroline and James. She stepped forward, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "I have something important to say." Her usual spoiled, entitled tone was gone, replaced by something strangely triumphant. In the stillness of a Thanksgiving evening, her voice rang unnaturally loud. "After dinner, perhaps." I started, but she cut me off sharply. "I'm pregnant with your husband's child. You need to get a divorce." The silver serving dish slipped from my mother's hands, crashing onto the polished floor with a dull thud. The dish rolled unsteadily, its metallic ring echoing through the silent room. Father shot up from his chair, the sudden movement causing the fireplace flames to flicker wildly. Our aunts and uncles froze where they stood. Cousin Emily clapped both hands over her mouth, her wide eyes darting between me and James. And James, with a smirk that sent a shiver down my spine, looked straight at me. "You're useless to me now." The weight of those words settled into the air, thick and suffocating. The family photographs on the wall seemed to watch over the moment, silent witnesses to my public humiliation. 7 years of fertility treatments, every sacrifice, every painful procedure, had led to this moment. And yet, when I finally spoke, my voice came out calm, steady, unshaken. "I won't divorce you." The room shifted. Caroline's smug expression faltered. James's smirk faded. The fireplace flames leaped, throwing their light across their now pale faces. As the weight of Caroline's confession hung in the air, I reached for the side table. Lifting Mother's crystal wine glass, I took a slow sip, letting the rich, velvety flavor settle on my tongue. It was a strange comfort, grounding me in the chaos unfolding around me. Settling back into the leather armchair, I surveyed the room, the home grandmother left me. The smell of roasted turkey still lingered, absurdly normal in the wake of my sister's betrayal. With a soft, unreadable smile, I turned my gaze to Caroline. "Caroline, sit down." The words, spoken calmly yet firmly, sliced through the tension. "Dinner is ready." Her bright dress, so bold under the firelight, seemed almost ridiculous now. Her fingers twitched, her breath hitched. Why are you acting like this?" Her voice trembled, the confidence from moments ago crumbling. At her feet, the silver dish my mother dropped remained untouched. Still holding my wine glass, I gently set it back onto the table, the quiet clink unnervingly loud in the heavy silence. "Let me explain why I won't divorce." Caroline's eyes widened, her breathing shallow. "Why?" Her voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. I leaned forward slightly. "Think about it," I said smoothly. "If I divorce James, what happens to you both?" The fire crackled loudly, filling the space between my words. I could feel our aunts and uncles stiffen, waiting for my next move. Even my parents stood motionless, as if bracing themselves. You believe that if I agree to a divorce, you and James can start a happy life together. For a moment, hope flashed in Caroline's eyes. But only for a moment. I let the silence stretch before speaking again. But reality is not that simple. My gaze flickered to James. His posture had changed. He stared at the floor, a tension creeping into his features. Beads of sweat formed at his temples. James is $5 million in debt. A gasp rippled through the room. Father staggered slightly, reaching out for the wall to steady himself. Mother let out a small cry, her hands covering her face. Caroline's expression shifted instantly, all color draining from her cheeks. As long as I do not divorce, James remains my husband. I continued, my tone light, almost casual. James swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. He was trapped, and he knew it. Which means, I added smoothly, Caroline, you are not the wife of a successful man. You are a single mother carrying the child of someone drowning in debt. Caroline's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the nearest sofa, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Mascara-streaked black tears stained her once flawless makeup. Her hands trembled as she clutched at her dress. But James said we'd build a new life together. Her voice was barely a whisper, but I caught it. I smiled coolly. A new life? Leaning back, I let my words sink in. You mean a life spent running from debt collectors? James finally snapped. I will figure out the debt. His voice was desperate, lacking its usual arrogant confidence. I tilted my head. Figure it out how? The question hit hard. James opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I watched the exact moment he realized his own failure. He had no answers. Not anymore. Caroline covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Tears streaked down her face, dripping onto the expensive upholstery of the sofa. She was crumbling piece by piece. I took my time, speaking slowly and deliberately. Shall I explain the reality you're about to face? Every word landed like a heavy blow. Our parents flinched, their bodies rigid with tension. A father who cannot even afford proper child support. The cold, unforgiving stares of strangers once they find out you're a single mother. Say goodbye to your lavish lifestyle. Each sentence tightened the noose around Caroline's crumbling resolve. By the fireplace, my father's fists clenched tightly, his knuckles white with rage. My mother sobbed quietly, her gaze filled with a mix of disappointment and sorrow. And yet, the most important part was still to come. I rose from my seat, still holding my wine glass, and stepped toward Caroline. Her tear-streaked face lifted slightly, but I didn't stop. I wanted her to feel the weight of my words. As long as I do not divorce James, he remains legally my husband. I stated, my voice calm, almost conversational. Her eyes widened in terror, understanding where this was going. And that means your child will legally be the product of an affair. Caroline's sobs echoed through the room, filling the silent air. James! My father's voice cut through the tension, sharp and full of fury. How dare you do this to my daughters? His veins bulged, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. The reserved, composed man I had known my entire life had reached his limit. Get out! Father's voice shook with emotion, his finger pointing directly at James. Get out of this house right now! Mother clutched her chest, staring at Caroline as fresh tears spilled from her eyes. The once proud daughter she adored was now reduced to this, humiliated, broken. Occasionally she shook her head, sighing heavily, as if she still could not believe it. Caroline collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Her vibrant magenta dress, once a statement of arrogance, was now a crumpled mess. Her runny mascara had left black streaks across her face. Across the room, the Thanksgiving feast sat untouched, the turkey now cold, the pumpkin pie forgotten. Our holiday traditions, passed down for generations, had been completely shattered. On a cold morning, I heard the doorbell ring. Strangers in dark suits stood outside, their demeanor unmistakably menacing. Debt collectors. From the parlor, James's trembling voice reached my ears. Please, just a little more time. I will pay, I swear. He was pleading, his usual arrogance gone. I watched from behind, sipping my wine, as the men cornered him with sharp, precise words. Each day, their visits became more aggressive. Small arguments at the doorstep turned into public spectacles. The neighborhood watched, whispering, their sympathies shifting into silent judgment. Meanwhile, Caroline's life unraveled even further. She had moved to the other side of Greenwich, renting a rundown apartment in a cheap residential area. It was the polar opposite of the luxury she once lived in. She now worked long hours at a nail salon, pushing through severe morning sickness while barely making enough to survive. Her designer clothes had been sold off, replaced by simple, inexpensive dresses. Her feet ached, her body weakened from exhaustion, but she had no choice. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of her mistakes was physically crushing her. One night, just as her shift ended, her phone rang. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Elizabeth, help me! I cannot take this anymore." I exhaled slowly, listening to the quiet sobs on the other end of the line. "This is the path you chose," I said coldly before hanging up. Even after I ended the call, I could still hear her crying in my mind. James had transformed into someone unrecognizable. The polished real estate agent was now just a pathetic, drunken mess. Each night, he drowned himself in cheap whiskey, his rage exploding against the furniture. He smashed bottles against the walls, the sharp crashes a reflection of our broken marriage. "Do something about this!" he would scream. "If you just divorce me, I could fix this." But there was nothing left to fix. Meanwhile, Caroline was finally understanding reality. Her perfect fantasy of a happy life with James had crumbled. She spent nights staring out her tiny apartment window, her body trembling with anxiety, realizing that the dream she chased had destroyed her. The family gathered once more in the living room. The fireplace burned weakly, its flames struggling to hold warmth. On the table sat piles of documents: James's debt records, casino receipts, IOUs from loan sharks. Their shadows stretched long across the dimly lit room. Father sat heavily into his chair, his voice slow and firm. "Caroline will not be coming back to this house." No one objected. The decision had been made. As the fireplace crackled, I looked at the family photos on the wall. In every one, we were smiling, so happy, so naive. It felt like they were mocking us now. That morning, I woke up to an unusual silence. The room felt empty, almost too still. James's drunken breathing, the constant sounds of his misery, gone. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach as I walked toward the master bedroom. The walk-in closet door was half open. Inside, empty hangers swung lightly, their contents missing. His Hermes ties gone. His weekend golf clubs gone. His expensive leather shoes gone. I walked into the garage. His Mercedes was missing. And deep down, I already knew what had happened. According to the security guard, James had slipped out before dawn, hauling several suitcases. The surveillance footage showed him getting into a taxi, leaving behind nothing but ruins. In the study, I found one last thing. In the desk drawer, his debt documents were stacked neatly, almost mockingly organized. Casino debts, $2 million. Loan sharks, $1.5 million. Credit card bills, another $1.5 million. A mountain of paper, telling the story of our 7-year marriage. And at the very back of the drawer, a single note, scribbled hastily. "I am not coming back." Even those hastily scribbled words lacked dignity. His Italian leather shoes by the entrance, gone. The Mercedes in the garage, vanished. Nothing remained to show he had ever been here. In the dim garage, I let out a slow breath. Everything had gone according to plan. Caroline was now living alone in a rundown apartment on the other side of Greenwich. The 30-year-old building had flickering hallway lights, a frequently broken elevator, and thin walls that let in every sound. Her tiny kitchen had a second-hand microwave, a plastic storage rack instead of proper cabinets, and cheap drugstore cosmetics where luxury brands used to be. Piles of thrift store baby items filled the corner, a used crib with chipped paint, faded clothes, and yellowed swaddling blankets. Her fridge, once stocked with imported cheeses and fine wines, now held discount groceries and cheap frozen meals. Dinner was no longer a plated steak but whatever she could reheat in minutes. Her body, worn from morning sickness and 10-hour shifts at the nail salon, was barely holding up. Customers, once friendly, now whispered behind her back. Everyone knew. A pregnant single woman, abandoned. At night, she sat by her window, staring at the city lights, as if hoping for a different reality. While her life collapsed, mine returned to order. In the mansion grandmother left me, my routine took shape. On weekdays, I led corporate audits, my promotion earning me trust among high-profile clients. Wall Street recognized my name. Magazines featured my work. From my office window, Manhattan stretched before me, a reminder of my success. Evenings were quiet, spent reading by the fireplace. Weekends I tended to the garden. The roses thrived, Dame de Ker's deep red blooms, Pierre de Ronsard's soft pink petals, iceberg's pure white flowers. They flourished under careful hands, untouched by betrayal. Mother visited with homemade pumpkin pie. Father helped in the garden in silence. The family wounds weren't gone, but they were healing. At dusk, I sat on the terrace, pouring Earl Grey into grandmother's Wedgwood cup. The climbing rose, new dawn, bloomed pale pink across the white pergola. A warm breeze carried the scent of flowers. The sky turned crimson, casting long shadows over the garden. Lifting my teacup, I allowed myself a small smile. Life moves forward. Choices come with consequences. The wind carried the thought away, into the deepening night, where the roses stood in silent witness.